Hello everyone, thanks for joining me live. Let me know whether you're watching this on live or watching on a replay. My name is Ishan Arora from PriMovers. I'm a physical therapist and have been helping people with aches and pains and injuries for more than 12 years now. In today's live stream, I will be talking about how you can prevent the hip pain or hip injuries for the long run. So, if you are someone who has a hip pain, do let me know in the comment box below. Or if you are someone who doesn't have any hip pain but would like to prevent the hip pain or any pain around the hip area in general, also let me know whether you are here to prevent the hip pain. Thanks for joining the live stream. And again, if you have any questions about anything related to hip pain or any pain in general, you can always put that in the comment box below. And I will try to answer the questions as soon as possible, or maybe in the chat later after the live stream is over. So let's get started with today's topic, as we can say, the hip pain. And we're going to understand what are the reasons for you to get the hip pain at the first place. Now, it's important to understand what exactly the hip area. So to visualize that, I'll be opening up my screen to show you the skeleton where exactly the hip area is. So let me just show you that in a second. I hope you can see my screen, and I'm going to show you what exactly the hip area looks like. All right. So here we are. So as we can see here, so the hip joint is where the thigh bone meets the pubic bone. So this is called the pubic bone, and this is the thigh bone, right one here. And so it makes a joint which is called the hip joint. This is exactly we're talking about today. And hip joint is one of the most important joint. It's a three-dimensional joint. It can move in all the directions. The basic movements which are available in the hip joint are, so your hip joint can your hip joint, when I'm talking about the hip joint, what I'm effectively talking about is your thigh bone movement on this bone here. So the movement of the thigh bone, which is here, over on this bone, which is here called the pubic bone. These two bones make the hip joint. And the main movements that are available in the hip joint is called the forward motion, which is called the forward flexion. It can go into extension. Your thigh bone can rotate outside. Your thigh bone can rotate inside. So these are the basic motions that are available in the hip joint. And again, it can move in all the three dimension, all the three direction, all the directions. And that makes this joint very dynamic joint. So it's one of the very strongest joint in the body, because again, the muscles which are surrounding the hip joints are pretty intense, and they are the long muscles, thick muscles, have the good muscle mass, and they are the one who provides the dynamic stability of the joint. And when we talk about this joint, we can understand like it has really various structures. So I'll just show you quickly here. So we have so many cartilage ligament area around this place, and which provides the static stability to this joint. That means when you're doing any movement around this area, this stability is provided by the ligaments which are holding the bones together. And the dynamic stability of this area is provided by your muscles, which are right on top here. And again, as I said, these muscles are pretty strong muscles in the body and can withstand good amount of force. They help in really providing the good amount of stability around this area. So what do we need to understand here is there are a number of factors which result in the hip pain or hip injuries. So again, if you're someone who's just experiencing the hip pain, it's important for you to understand where exactly the injury might be happening, and that you usually get to know with a clinical examination by a physical therapist or a doctor, or you get to know through the investigative findings, which again usually your healthcare professionals or practitioners would guide you whether you need any further investigation to rule out what problem is happening around this area. But to help you understand this area in general, what I'll tell you is, so there are a number of areas which can be injured around this place and which can result in the pain around this area, which is called the hip region. So they can be muscle injuries called the muscle strain, or the other soft tissue structures called the ligaments, which is called the ligamental strain around this area. And then we have bone, so there can be a fracture in the bone. There are a number of ligaments here, inguinal ligament, and that can be injured. So again, as you can see here, this is called the inguinal ligament, which can be injured. They can be fractured in this bone. They can be fractured around this area in the bone. So there are a number of areas which can be injured, can result in the pain. And so you have so many ligaments around this area which is supporting and stabilizing the joint. So if any of these areas are injured, you can feel the pain here. Another important area, or the reason of pain, is one of the nerve which can be compressed around the hip area called the sciatic nerve. And there is a very important muscle. So the muscle around this area, the buttock muscles, can be injured and also can be strained because of the overload on the muscle, overstretching of the muscle. So again, there are a number of reasons which can result in pain around this area. So it's important to understand how you can fix them. So again, there is a very particular muscle called the piriformis muscle, and again, if you see, it's sitting on top of the sciatic nerve. If this muscle gets tighter for any reason, can get you the pain in the back of your hip area. uh, so in this case, like, you feel the pain in the back hip area. And again, usually this muscle has a lot of trigger points, which are like the tender spots which build up in the muscle. If this muscle gets tighter because of any reason, there are good chances that this trigger points can build in the muscle over time. And by nature, the trigger points are the points in the muscle which refers the pain down the leg, or refer the pain in general. So again, the pain could be referring to some other body part, and again, usually done by the trigger points as well. If any of the muscle has trigger point, whenever these points gets triggered because of any activity or because of overload or pressure on these areas, they can refer the pain in the other body parts. So especially in this case, sometimes these trigger points refer the pain down the leg as well. So it's important to understand what is the reason of your pain that is coming around this area. Or again, this muscle sitting on top of the sciatic nerve, sometimes this muscle can start irritating the nerve, can start compressing the nerve, and you may feel the pain traveling down to the leg. Very, very important for we to understand. Again, if you feel I'm going fast, do let me know in the comment box below. And also, if you have any questions for me, please do let me know in the comment box below. um, and again, it'll be great if you let me know where you're tuning in from, so that, and if you could turn on the live stream notifications, so that each time we go live, you get notified automatically. And again, if you see, this is like a small pouch area here. As you can see here, this is like a space between the muscle and the bone. These are called the bursae. Usually, again, these are basically the fluid filled pouches which are trying to protect and like providing a little bit of space between the muscles and the bone, so that they're not rubbing against each other. Because if they're rubbing against each other, we can definitely injure either the bone or the muscles. So again, they are the ones which are providing like a little bit of cushion around this area. So very important. Again, one of the common areas that usually get sprained is these muscles called the iliacus muscle around this area, and this is called the sartorius muscle. So there are so many muscles which can be injured and can be sprained, or like the ligaments can be sprained, which can result in the pain around this area. Now, what's important for us to understand, what are the reasons why do we get there? What are the main causative factors that usually result in the pain around this area? So I'll be just talking about that. Okay, so again, one of the most common reason of pain around the hip area is, especially if you're not someone who got injured because of being in the sporting activity where you got hit by another player, or like you were playing an intense sport and you really provided good amount of impact around this area. One of the most common reason for us to have pain around this area is if we are sitting for too long at a stretch. So for example, if I am sitting for too long at a stretch, thanks to my lifestyle, thanks to my job, or maybe like in general I have been sitting for longer hours, there are good chances that what I will start building up and developing is called stiffness in the muscles around this area, and the joint will start becoming stiff and tight. Now, as soon as the joint is becoming stiff and tight, definitely my movement will be restricted, and slowly and gradually it'll start impacting my muscles, which are covering around this area. So, just because the joint is not mobile enough, there are good chances the muscles surrounding this area could be very, very tight. And you would have heard people talking about like sometimes they stretch the muscle quite a lot, but still they feel the muscles are not getting enough flexible. And the reason for that to happen is because you are definitely working on the muscle. You're definitely working on the muscle and you're trying to improve the length of the muscle, but what is happening is since you're not working on the joint motion, which is the primary area for you to be working on, there are good chances that you will not see enough improvement happening in the muscle length as well. So that's why it's very important for you to understand the another factor which results in the hip pain. And for someone like who's not like got injured is lack of activity. If you're moving less in general on a daily basis, so there are good chances that you will start developing the hip stiffness and the tightness around this area, and which can result over time into the hip osteoarthritis, which is like a degenerative process setting up in the bones and the especially in the bony area, and which deteriorate the function of the joint over time and definitely start setting up the muscle weakness around this area. The third reason, again, very, very common reason for the hip injuries and pain is basically the hip injuries happening in general. So it could be a muscle injury, ligament injury. There is a cover around any joint, so which is kind of guarding and also providing the stability called the labral tear around the hip area. And you can have something called as a trochanteric bursitis, which is pain in the outer side of the hip in the buttock region. So these are the typical areas which usually get injured. Now, today I will not be going much more in detail, and I'll be just talking to you in general how you can prevent the hip pain, hip discomfort, or any irritation that you have around that area. Or if you are someone who is working in general to prevent injuries to different body parts and want to make the area stronger, it's very, very important for you to understand what are basically the areas, the components of fitness in the lower body, especially around the hip area. And once you start working on these things, there are good chances that you can limit the number of injuries and aches and pains which could be building up for you or might be happening for you. So you can prevent that. Okay. And again, if as I mentioned, like there are a number of common reasons. If fall in any of the category, there are good chances that the hip could be compromised somewhere in maybe in the movement, maybe in the like a lack of mobility or flexibility in the muscle. So you need to start working on that to fix or to prevent the pain for the long run. So all right. Now, again, the first and the foremost thing that you need to keep in mind. Since we're talking about the joint, it's very, very important for us to understand what are the components of fitness that you should be working on to prevent the injuries. The first and the foremost thing that you need to work on is work on improving the mobility of the joint. That means, since I'm talking about the hip joint, it's very important for us to start improving the mobility of the hip joint. And again, as I said, like sometimes we're stretching the muscles, and you would have been told by someone that you are having the lack of movement stiffness around the hip area, and you have been stretching the muscle, but you haven't worked really on improving the joint motion. Then there are good chances that whatever flexibility work you're doing will not help you on the long run, and your mobility of the joint will not be able to improve because you're just working on only on one component of your fitness around this area, or maybe you're working on the strength as well, but you're not working on improving the mobility. So again, whatever you're doing will not help maybe for the long run. So it's important to understand what are you trying to improve, and are you really working on all the components of fitness of each joint or not. And if you're not, then there are good chances that again, it will not help us on a long run. The second component that we should be working on is improving the flexibility of the muscle. So it's important that we restore after we are done working on the joint mobility, which is like we are improving the joint range of motion. Each and every joint has a certain degree of range of motion. For example, I can bring my knee to the chest, which is the hip motion again, to almost 125 degrees or so. And if my range is almost around 100 or 110 degrees, there are good chances that again the joint is definitely stiff, and so the muscle will also be very stiff, because perpetually your load on the muscle and the joint will be a lot more with your normal activity of daily living, and which will result in having a lot of inflexibility issues. So again, after you're done working on improving the joint motion, the second thing that you should be working on is improving the or restoring the flexibility of the muscles around the hip area. So all the muscles that I just showed you right in the front of the hip, the buttock region, the groin area. Once you worked on improving your joint motion, the next thing you work on improving the flexibility of the muscles. And once you improve the flexibility of the muscles to the good extent, the third component that you should be start working on is improving the stability of the area. So again, most of the times when you are too tight around that area, there are good chances that your stability will not be compromised much. But if you are someone who's too lax or too loose in around various joints in the body, there are good chances that your stability around the hip area would be compromised, and that can also result in the pain symptoms around that area. And when I'm talking about the stability, each joint needs to be stable to move, and if your joint is not stable to move, there are good chances that you can develop the pain around that area. Very, very important for us to improve and work on that area. The third component, the fourth component after working on improving the joint stability is improving the joint the muscle endurance. And so now is the time for you to start working on the strength of the muscle. You work so you're not working on the strength, but you're working on the endurance. And what is the difference between these two is these two are again, when I'm talking about this endurance, you're working on the muscles around the hip area. You are strengthening, you are doing the exercises, but you're doing a lot more repetitions, but you're not putting the load on the muscles so much. And again, if you're putting less load on the muscle, doing more repetition, that's when you build up the endurance in the muscles. And you work on the endurance of the muscles first, and then you work on the strength of the muscles. Very important. First you work on the endurance of the muscles, and the next phase that you need to be working on improving the strength of the muscles. So after working on endurance, you work on the strength of the muscles. So these are typically the areas and where you have to be start working on if you would like to prevent hip pain or the pain around this around the area around the hip area. Again, I mentioned there are so many areas which can be injured. And again, if you're focusing in this pattern the way I showed, you started working on your mobility first, improve the joint range of motion, followed by the flexibility of the muscle. The third is you improve the stability of the area, the joint. The fourth one, you work on the endurance of the muscles. And the fifth one is when you work on the strength of the muscles. In this phase of the strengthening phase, you start increasing the load on the muscles, and you reduce the number of repetitions of the exercise that you're doing to improve the strength. So this is the sequence that you should be working on. And again, as I said, if you start working in this way, there are good chances that you can prevent major aches and pains and injuries which could be building up for you around the hip area. Um Again, yeah. So this is the place where you can download our free resources, which usually we provide on our website, and you can download the free resources which will help you prevent aches and pains and injuries around various body parts. So it's www.primovers.com/free resources. And once you go on the link, you can download any of the free resources which you think might be of help to you. And yeah, that's really it for today. And if you have any questions, do let me know in the comment box below. And thank you so much for joining the live stream today, and have a great day.